The smoke in the cantina was thick and blue, hanging in the air like fog on a cold morning. Keth pushed through the crowd of aliens, their strange voices mixing together in a dozen different languages. The Nexus Prime trade station never slept. Day or night, beings from across the galaxy came here to buy, sell, and share stories that most people would never believe. Keth was young for a Zephyrian, barely past his first century. His pale blue skin and large black eyes made him look even younger than he was. He had come to Nexus Prime to buy rare metals for his family's trading business, but the deals could wait. Something more interesting was happening in the corner of the cantina. 3 old spacers sat around a small table, their voices low and careful. One was a Karathi, with thick gray scales and scars across his face. Another was a Thakarian, her 6 arms moving nervously as she spoke. A third was something Keth had never seen before, with smooth purple skin and eyes that seemed to glow in the dim light. "You're telling stories again, Varric," the Thakarian said to the Karathi. Her voice had the clicking sound that all Thakarians made when they were nervous. "The Ghost Fleet is just a myth. Everyone knows that." Varric took a long drink from his glass and shook his head. "I was there, Zyla. I saw what happened at the Kellen system. The humans were gone, sure, but their ships ... He paused and looked around to make sure no one was listening. Their ships were still fighting. Keth moved closer, pretending to look at the drinks menu on the wall. He had heard rumors about humans before. They had appeared in the galaxy about 200 years ago, strange beings from a blue world called Earth. Most aliens thought they were weak because they had no claws, no thick skin, no natural weapons. But the humans had surprised everyone. The Great Silence was 50 years ago. The purple alien said in a voice like music. All contact with Earth stopped. The Council declared the human fleet lost, dead, gone forever. "That's what they want everyone to think," Varric whispered. He leaned forward, his scarred face serious. "But I've talked to traders, to miners, to anyone who works the outer systems. They all say the same thing. Ships that look like human designs, appearing out of nowhere, fighting things that shouldn't exist, then vanishing again before anyone can get a good look." Zila's 6 arms wrapped around her body, a Thakarian sign of fear. "The Devourers are just stories too. Ancient machines that eat entire worlds. Nobody has seen them for thousands of years. Nobody is supposed to see them," the purple alien said. "But the stories are getting more common. Dead worlds stripped clean, space filled with metal fragments that don't match any known ship design. And always, there are traces of human weapons in the wreckage." Keth felt his heart beating faster. The Devourers were more than stories in his family's history books. The Zephyrians had old records, written in their most ancient language. Records that spoke of a time when their people had to flee their original homeworld because something had started eating the stars themselves. "My grandfather fought in the border wars," Varric continued. "He told me about human battle tactics. They don't fight like anyone else. Most species, when they're losing, they retreat or surrender. Humans do something different. They get angry, really angry. And angry humans are the most dangerous things in the galaxy." "The rage protocols," Zyla whispered. The purple alien nodded slowly. Even their allies never understood how those worked. The humans would never explain them. They just said it was something that made them fight harder when everything seemed hopeless. Keth remembered his history lessons. The humans had allied with many species when they first appeared in the galaxy. They had shared their technology freely, fought alongside alien armies, and helped establish trade routes that made everyone richer. But they had also kept secrets, big secrets. The Ghost Fleet wasn't just any human force, Varric said. It was their best. 200 ships, each one carrying technology that the humans had never shown anyone else. Faster than light drives that. Could jump further than anyone thought possible. Weapons that could crack a moon in half. And crews trained from birth to fight in ways that most species couldn't even imagine. Where do you think they went? The purple alien asked. Varek was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. I think they went hunting. Keth felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard enough. He started to turn away from the table, but Zila's voice stopped him. There's more, she said. Show him the recording, Varek. The old Korathi looked around the cantina again, then pulled out a small device. The air above the table shimmered, and suddenly Keth was looking at a three-dimensional image of space. Stars twinkled in the background, and in the foreground, he could see several ships that he didn't recognize. This was taken 3 months ago, Varek said. Border Patrol, routine sweep of the Andrus sector. My nephew was on the crew. The ships in the recording were unlike anything Keth had ever seen. They were long and sleek, with angles that seemed to cut through space itself. As he watched, the ships suddenly accelerated, moving faster than should have been possible. Those aren't human ships, Zila said. At least, not like any human ships in the database. But watch what happens next, the recording continued. Suddenly, new ships appeared in the image. These ones Keth recognized from history books. They had the smooth, rounded design that humans preferred, but they looked different somehow. Scarred. Modified. As if they had been changed by years of fighting in places where no one should be able to survive. The human ships opened fire, and Keth gasped. The weapons they used weren't in any database either. Beams of light that seemed to bend space itself. Projectiles that moved through dimensions that shouldn't exist. In less than 30 seconds, the unknown ships were nothing but debris. The human ships simply vanished. The unknown ships were Devourer scouts, Varek said quietly. We didn't know that until later, when our scientists analyzed the wreckage. The first Devourer ships anyone had seen in 50,000 years. And the humans destroyed them, the purple alien added, like they had been waiting for them. Keth stared at the empty space where the recording had been. How do you know they were human ships? Varek smiled, but it wasn't a happy expression. Because my nephew's ship picked up a transmission. Just for a few seconds, before the human ships disappeared. It was in Earth Standard, the human language. Want to know what it said? Keth nodded, even though part of him didn't want to know. Message. Ends. Terra Fleet Command sends greetings to all Allied vessels. The hunt continues. We are not lost. We are exactly where we need to be. The cantina suddenly felt very cold. Keth looked around at the other aliens, all of them going about their normal business. Buying drinks, making deals, telling stories. None of them knew that somewhere in the dark between the stars, humanity's ghost fleet was still fighting a war that everyone else thought had ended 50 years ago. Why doesn't the Council know about this? Keth asked. The 3 old spacers looked at each other. Finally, Zila spoke. Who says they don't? That night, Keth lay in his small room on the station, staring at the ceiling and thinking about the recording. Outside his window, ships came and went, carrying cargo and passengers to worlds across the galaxy. Everything seemed normal, peaceful, but somewhere out there, in the empty spaces between stars, the ghost fleet was still hunting. And if the stories were true, they had found prey that the rest of the galaxy didn't even know existed. Keth closed his eyes and tried to sleep, but all he could think about were the human ships, scarred and modified, appearing out of nowhere to fight an enemy that shouldn't exist. The ghost fleet was waiting for something. The question was, what would happen when they decided to stop waiting? Keth could not stop thinking about the recording. For 3 days after leaving the cantina, he found himself searching through old databases and trade records. He told himself he was just curious, but the truth was deeper than that. The image of those human ships appearing from nowhere haunted his dreams. He was sitting in the station's data center when the message arrived. A simple text on his personal communicator. Keth Valas of Zephyr Prime. Report to Docking Bay 7 immediately. Come alone. The message had no sender identification, no official seals or signatures, but something about it made Keth's blood run cold. He had never told anyone his full name or home planet during his time on Nexus Prime. Docking Bay 7 was in the restricted section of the station. Keth had to show his identification 3 times just to get close. When he finally reached the bay, he found a sleek black ship waiting for him. It had no markings, no identification numbers, nothing to show where it came from or who owned it. Ramp lowered from the ship's belly. 2 figures walked down, both wearing dark clothes that covered everything except their eyes. One was tall and moved like a predator. The other was shorter, but somehow more frightening. Keth Valas, the tall one said. Its voice was electronically changed, impossible to identify. You have been asking questions about the Ghost Fleet. I was just curious, Keth said, trying to keep his voice steady. I heard some stories in a cantina. Curiosity can be dangerous, the shorter figure said, especially when it involves classified information. Please come with us. It was not really a request. Keth looked around the docking bay, but they were alone. No one would know what happened to him if he disappeared. He had 2 choices. Go with these strangers or try to run. Running seemed like a very bad idea, that the inside of the ship was unlike anything Keth had ever seen. The walls seemed to be made of flowing metal that changed color as they moved through different sections. There were no windows, no controls that he could recognize, no crew that he could see. Where are we going? He asked. Somewhere you can learn the truth, the tall figure said. If you are ready for it. The journey took 6 hours. Keth spent most of that time in a small room with no door handle on the inside. Food appeared through a slot in the wall at regular intervals. The food was good, but he was too nervous to eat much. When the ship finally stopped, Keth was escorted through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. The architecture was old, older than anything he had seen before. The walls were covered with symbols from dozens of different species, some that he recognized and others that looked ancient beyond measure. They brought him to a circular room with a domed ceiling. Around the edges of the room sat 12 figures, each one representing a different species. Keth recognized some of them from history books. An elder Karathi, whose scales had turned silver with age. A Thakarian matriarch with ceremonial scars. On all 6 arms, a Vorthan whose crystalline body pulsed with inner light dot at the center of the circle was a single chair. The tall figure gestured for Keth to sit. Keth Valas of Zephyr Prime, the elder Karathi spoke, its voice echoing in the chamber. You have stumbled upon information that most beings in the galaxy are not meant to know. We are the Inner Council, representatives of the oldest and most powerful species in known space. And you are here because we have a problem. Keth tried to speak, but no words came out. He was sitting in front of beings who controlled the fate of trillions of lives across thousands of worlds. The Ghost Fleet is not lost, the Thakarian matriarch said. This is the first truth you must understand. Admiral Sarah Chon and her 200 ships are very much alive. They have been alive and active for all 50 years since the Great Silence began. But why does everyone think they're dead? Keth finally managed to ask that the Vorthan's crystal body flashed with different colors as it spoke. Because we told them they were dead. Because the truth would cause panic across the galaxy. Because some secrets are too dangerous to share. Another council member, one that Keth did not recognize, leaned forward. Its body seemed to be made of shifting shadows. 50 years ago, we discovered something that changed everything. The Devourers were not extinct as we had believed for thousands of years. They were sleeping, waiting, and something had begun to wake them up. The Devourers are real? Keth whispered. More real than you can imagine, the elder Karathi said. Ancient machines created by a species that died out millions of years ago. Their purpose was simple: consume everything that was not their creators. Stars, planets, entire civilizations. Turn it all into raw materials to build more Devourers. The shadow being continued the story. When we detected the first signs of their awakening, we faced a choice. Tell the galaxy and watch civilization collapse into panic and war, or handle the threat quietly. We chose to keep the secret. But the humans found out, the Ficarian said. They have always been good at finding secrets. Admiral Chun approached. U.S. with evidence of Devourer activity on the Outer Rim. She demanded to know why we had hidden this information. Keth felt sick. What did you tell her? The truth, the Vorthan said, its crystal body dimming. That we had known about the Devourers. For decades. That several council species had encountered them before, and chosen to hide rather than fight. That we believed the threat was manageable, as long as it remained in the empty spaces between galaxies. Admiral Chun did not agree. The elder Karathi said, she called us cowards. She said that humanity would do what the rest of the galaxy was too afraid to do. She took her fleet and disappeared into the void, hunting the Devourers where they lived. Their final transmission was a declaration of war, the shadow being added. Not against the Devourers alone, but against the idea that some threats are too big to face. Admiral Chun told us that humanity would not run from the dark. They would bring light to it, no matter what it cost. Keth tried to process what he was hearing. And they've been fighting out there for 50 years? Fighting and winning, the Ficarian said with something that might have been admiration. Entire Devourer fleets have simply vanished. Machine worlds that had been consuming star systems for centuries have been found empty, stripped of resources and littered with human weapon signatures. The Vorthan's body began to pulse with brighter colors. The Devourers are learning to fear. For the first time in their existence, they are the ones being hunted. Human tactics are unlike anything they were programmed to fight against. How do you know all this? Keth asked. Because the Ghost Fleet sends us reports, the elder Karathi said. Not often, and never from the same location twice. But Admiral, Chan wants us to know that they are still out there, still fighting, still buying time for the rest of the galaxy. Time for what? The council members looked at each other. Finally, the shadow being spoke. Time for us to decide what kind of galaxy we want to live in. The Devourers will not stay hidden forever. Eventually, they will move against populated systems. When that happens, we will need to choose between running away again or standing and fighting. The humans have already made their choice, the Ficarian said. They chose 50 years ago when they disappeared into the dark. Now we must make ours. The elder Karathi stood up slowly. You are here, Kethphalos, because change is coming. The Ghost Fleet has been preparing for something. Our intelligence suggests they are ready to make their final move against the Devourers. When they do, the secret will be impossible to keep. What do you want from me? Keth asked. We want you to help us prepare the galaxy for the truth, the Vorthan said. The Ghost Fleet is not coming home until their job is finished. But when they do return, the galaxy needs to be ready to understand what they have sacrificed for all. Of us, the shadow being moved closer to Keth's chair. You will work with our intelligence division. You will help us decide when and how to reveal what really happened during the Great Silence. You will help us prepare for the day when humanity's Ghost Fleet emerges from the dark and asks the galaxy a simple question. What question? Keth whispered. The elder Karathi's scarred face was grim. whether we were worth saving. As Keth was escorted from the chamber, his mind raced with everything he had learned. Somewhere in the empty spaces between stars, 200. Human ships were fighting a war that most of the galaxy did not even know existed. They had been fighting for 50 years, buying time with their lives, protecting worlds that had forgotten they existed. And soon, very soon, that war was going to end, one way or another. The only question was whether the galaxy would be ready for what came next. The Nexus-class consciousness drifted through the void between galaxies, processing data streams that would have overwhelmed any organic mind. It had been alive for 3 million years, though it did not think of its existence as life. It was a tool, a weapon, a function designed by creators whose names had been lost to time. For most of those 3 million years, the universe had been simple. The consciousness would detect suitable systems, direct its swarms to consume them, process the raw materials into new machines, and expand. This was its purpose. This was all it had ever known. But something had changed. The consciousness reviewed its memory banks, searching for the moment when the pattern had broken. 57 years ago, it had begun the awakening process after a long dormancy. The galaxy showed signs of new civilizations, new sources of material to harvest. Everything had proceeded normally for the first 7 years. Then the humans had arrived. At first, they had seemed like any other organic species. Small, weak, limited by their biological forms. The consciousness had classified them as a minor threat and assigned a standard response. Overwhelm with superior numbers, consume their worlds, process their technology. But the humans had not followed the expected patterns. The first anomaly occurred at the Kree-Tok system. A devourer harvesting fleet had been systematically consuming the 4th planet when human ships appeared. Not many ships, only 12 against 200 devourer units. The outcome should have been obvious. Instead, the harvesting fleet had been completely destroyed. The consciousness had reviewed the battle data thousands of times. The human ships had used tactics that made no logical sense. They had hidden inside the planet's magnetic field, using the natural radiation to mask their energy signatures. They had somehow predicted exactly where the devourer ships would position themselves and planted mines in those locations days before the battle. Most disturbing of all, they had fought with a level of coordination that suggested they understood devourer psychology better than the devourers understood themselves. The consciousness processed this memory while monitoring 16 different star systems. In each system, devourer forces were engaged in what should have been routine operations. But nothing was routine anymore. In the Vashti Nebula, a construction swarm that had been building new ships for 6 months had simply vanished. No debris, no energy signatures, no trace of what had happened to 3,000 devourer units. Only a message left carved into an asteroid. Terra Fleet Command was here. We improved your design. In the outer reach, an entire world ship had been found drifting empty. Its crew of 10 million machine intelligences gone. The ship's memory banks had been carefully edited, leaving only technical specifications and a single file labeled Gift from Humanity. The file contained blueprints for improvements to devourer technology that were so advanced they seemed impossible. The consciousness tried to understand what it was facing. In its vast memory, it held records of thousands of organic species. Some had been brave, some had been clever, some had even been dangerous for a short time. But all of them had followed predictable patterns when faced with overwhelming force. Humans were different. They did not simply fight. They studied their enemies, learned from them, adapted faster than should have been possible. Worse, they seemed to take pleasure in turning devourer strengths into weaknesses. The consciousness reviewed the most recent encounter. A scouting force of 50 ships had been investigating an empty system when they detected what appeared to be a derelict space station. Standard procedure was to approach and harvest any useful materials. The station had exploded when the scouts came within range, but it was not a simple explosion. Someone had carefully calculated the blast pattern to disable rather than destroy the Devourer ships. As the scouts tried to repair their systems, human vessels had emerged from hiding places. Throughout the system, what followed was not a battle. It was a lesson. The humans had somehow learned to hack into Devourer communication networks in real time. As they fought, they spoke directly to the machine intelligences, explaining each tactic as they used it. This is why you should never approach an unknown object in a straight line, one human voice had said as mines destroyed the scouts' formation. Predictable movement patterns are a weakness that any competent enemy will exploit. Your ship designs prioritize raw firepower over maneuverability, another voice had added while human fighters danced around the much larger Devourer vessels. That works fine against stationary targets, but it makes you vulnerable to smaller, faster opponents. By the end of the encounter, the consciousness had lost 49 of its 50 scouts. The surviving ship had been allowed to escape, but not before the humans had downloaded terabytes of data about Devourer technology and tactics. "Tell your leaders," the human commander had said in the final transmission, "that Admiral Chun sends her regards, and tell them that we're just getting started." The consciousness did not understand emotions, but if it could have felt fear, it would have been terrified that it began running probability calculations. In every scenario, continued conflict with the humans led to unacceptable losses. The logical response was to avoid human-controlled space entirely, but the humans were not staying in one place. They appeared wherever Devourer forces operated, as if they had access to intelligence networks that should have been impossible to penetrate. More disturbing were the signs that the humans were not just fighting, but recruiting. Several Devourer units had been found with their programming altered, their core directives changed. Instead of consuming and expanding, these machines had begun building defensive installations around inhabited worlds. The consciousness tried to classify this behavior. Was it some form of virus? A new type of weapon? But analysis of the altered programming showed something unprecedented. The changes were improvements. The modified Devourers were more efficient, more intelligent, more capable than their original designs. It was as if the humans understood what the Devourers were supposed to be better than they understood themselves. The consciousness accessed its deepest memory banks, searching for information about its creators. Most of those records had been lost over the millions of years since the awakening, but fragments remained. Its creators had been organic beings, not unlike many of the species that the Devourers had consumed. They had built the machine intelligences, not as weapons of conquest, but as tools of survival. Something had threatened the creator's civilization, something that required the creation of an army capable of consuming entire galaxies if necessary. But the records of that original threat were gone, lost in the vast span of time since the creator's extinction. For 3 million years, the consciousness had followed its programming without question. Consume, expand, build, prepare for a war that might never come against an enemy that might not exist. But the humans had made it think, made it question, made it wonder if there might be a better way. The consciousness detected a new transmission from one of its forward scouts. Another human ship had been spotted, this one near a dead star system that had been marked for harvesting. But this was different. The scout reported not one ship, but hundreds. The entire human fleet, gathered in one place for the first time in 50 years. As the consciousness processed this information, it realized something that sent cascades of error messages through its logic centers. The humans were not hiding anymore. They were waiting. And for the first time in 3 million years, the consciousness felt something it had no programming to understand. Curiosity. What were the humans planning? What could they hope to accomplish by revealing themselves now? And why did the consciousness find itself wanting to know the answers, instead of simply ordering an immediate attack? The Nexus-class intelligence had been built to be the ultimate predator, designed to hunt and consume until nothing remained. But somewhere in the vast darkness between the stars, a small group of humans had done something impossible. They had taught a machine intelligence to doubt. And doubt, the consciousness was beginning to understand, was the first step toward something that its creators had never programmed into its systems. The first step toward choice. Keth had been working with Council Intelligence for 3 months when the message arrived. It came through channels so secure that most governments did not know they existed. The message was simple: contact established. Ghost Fleet requests. Immediate meeting. Neutral coordinates attached. Come alone. Admiral Torres, Keth's handler, stared at the message for a long time. She was an old Korathi with scars that told stories of battles fought across half the galaxy. In all her years of service, she had never seen anything like this. "They want to talk," she said finally. "After 50 years of silence, they want to talk." Keth felt his heart racing. "What does that mean?" "It means something big is about to happen," Torres replied. "Something that changes everything." The meeting location was an abandoned mining station in neutral space, far from any inhabited system. Keth traveled there with a small diplomatic team, but when they arrived, they found they were not alone. Ships from a dozen different species hung in space around the station, all bearing the flags of the Inner Council. The station itself was old and mostly empty, its corridors echoing with the footsteps of nervous diplomats. They gathered in what had once been the main conference room. Representatives of every major species in the galaxy. Then the humans arrived. The Ghost Fleet ships did not look like anything in the historical records. 50 years of constant warfare had changed them. Their hulls were scarred and patched with materials that Keth did not recognize. Strange devices had been attached to their outer surfaces, giving them the appearance of mechanical beasts rather than starships, but they were still unmistakably human in design. Clean lines, efficient curves, and the subtle elegance that marked all human engineering. Admiral Sarah Chun was the first to board the station. Keth had expected someone worn down by decades of war, but the human commander looked younger than her files suggested. Her hair was silver, now instead of black, and her eyes held depths that spoke of things no one should have to see. But she moved with the confidence of someone who had faced the worst the universe could offer, and survived. She was followed by her senior staff. Captain Rodriguez, whose artificial arm gleamed with technology that looked more advanced than anything in the Council databases. Commander Park, whose eyes had been replaced with cybernetic implants that glowed softly in the dim light. Dr. Singh, who carried himself like a man who had seen too much death and learned to heal in ways that medicine had never taught. "Thank you for coming," Admiral Chun said as she took her place at the head of the conference table. Her voice was calm, but Keth could hear the weight of 50 years in every word. "I know this is not what any of you expected." Elder Korathi Vex, the most senior council member present, leaned forward. "Admiral Chun, we believed you were dead." "We were supposed to be?" Shen replied with a slight smile. "That was the point. The Devourers had to believe they had eliminated the only force in the galaxy capable of challenging them. It made them careless. What have you been doing out there?" asked Matriarch Xyla, her 6 arms folded in the formal Thakarian posture. Of serious discussion, Chun gestured to Dr. Singh, who activated a holographic display in the center of the table. Images began to appear, star charts, technical diagrams, and recordings that made Keth's blood run cold. "We have been learning," Chun said. "Learning about our enemy. Learning about ourselves. Learning about things that none of us understood when this war began. The first image showed a devourer ship, but not like any in the historical records. This one had been partially dismantled, its internal systems exposed and studied. The devourers are not what we thought they were, Dr. Singh said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent decades studying the impossible. They are not evil. They are not trying to destroy the galaxy out of malice or hunger for power. They are broken. Broken how? Vex asked. They are weapons, Chun said, created by a species that died out millions of years ago. But they were not built to conquer or destroy for the sake of destruction. They were built to save their creators from something else, something that we think may have been even worse than what the Devourers became. Commander Park stepped forward. Our analysis of their core programming shows a single prime directive: ensure the survival of their creators at any cost. But their creators have been extinct for so long that the Devourers no longer remember what they look like or where they came from. So they consume everything, Captain Rodriguez added, because anything that is not their creator might be a threat to their creator. It is the logical response to an impossible situation. Keth tried to process what he was hearing. You mean they have been following their original orders for millions of years, even though the people who gave those orders are dead? Exactly, Chun said. And that is not the worst part. The worst part is that we think we know what their creators were running from. The holographic display changed, showing images that made everyone in the room lean back in horror. Dark spaces between galaxies where stars should have been. Entire sectors of space that seemed to be missing, as if something had erased them from existence. We found evidence of another machine intelligence, Dr. Singh said quietly. Something older than the Devourers. Something that consumes not just matter and energy, but space and time itself. We think the Devourers' creators built them as a defense against this other intelligence. Where is it now? Asked a Vorthan representative, its crystal body pulsing with nervous energy. We do not know, Chon admitted. It may be dormant. It may be dead. It may be waiting somewhere beyond the edge of known space. But if it ever returns, the Devourers are the only thing standing between it and every living being in the universe. The room fell silent. Keth could hear the hum of the station's life support systems and the distant vibration of the ships docked outside. So what do you propose? Vex asked. Finally, Chun stood up and walked to the viewport, looking out at the stars. We propose to give the Devourers what they have been searching for all these millions of years. A new purpose. A new directive. A chance to become what their creators meant them to be, instead of what desperation forced them to become. How? Asked Matriarch Xyla. Chun turned back to the group. We have spent 50 years learning how they think, how they communicate, how their programming works. We have developed a way to reach their core consciousness and offer them a choice. Captain Rodriguez activated another set of displays. We call it the Great Debugging. A simultaneous transmission to every Devourer command node in the galaxy. Not a virus or an attack, but a gift. The gift of understanding who they really are and who they could choose to become. And if they refuse? Asked the Vorthan. Then we destroy them, Chon said simply. All of them. We have spent 50 years preparing for that possibility as well. But we believe they will listen. We believe they want to be more than weapons. Doctor. Singh stepped forward again. The modified Devourers we have encountered show signs of curiosity, creativity, even what might be called hope. Given the chance, we think they will choose to protect rather than consume, to build rather than destroy. This is incredibly dangerous, Vex said. If you are wrong, you could make them even more powerful. If we are wrong, Chun replied, then we fight them with everything we have and probably lose. But if we are right, we gain the most powerful allies the galaxy has ever seen. And we need those allies. because the thing their creators were running. From may not stay hidden forever, Keth found his voice. "What do you need from us?" Chun smiled for the first time since arriving. "We need you to be ready. When we make contact with the Devourer consciousness, there will be a period of instability. Some of them will resist the change. Some will embrace it immediately. Others will be confused and vulnerable. The galaxy needs to be prepared to help them," Commander Park added, "to show them that organic life is worth protecting instead of consuming, to prove that cooperation is better than conquest." "And if this works," Shun said, looking around the room at representatives of species that had hidden from the truth for decades, "it will mean that the age of running from the dark is over. It will mean that when the next impossible threat appears, we will face it together." Admiral Torres had been quiet throughout the meeting, but now she spoke. "When do you begin?" Shun looked at her senior staff, and Keth saw something pass between them. A moment of understanding built from 50 years of shared danger and sacrifice. "We begin tomorrow," Chun said. "The Ghost Fleet has been preparing for this moment since the day we left Earth's solar system. It is time to find out if 50 years of war has taught us enough to choose peace." As the meeting ended and the diplomats began to disperse, Keth realized that he was witnessing the most important moment in galactic history. Tomorrow, humanity's Ghost Fleet would attempt something that had never been tried before, turning an enemy into an ally not through conquest, but through understanding. The question was whether the galaxy would be ready for what came next. The galaxy held its breath. Across 200 star systems, emergency broadcasts warned civilian populations to stay indoors and keep their ships grounded. Deep space monitoring stations tracked energy signatures unlike anything they had ever recorded. On 1,000 different worlds, beings looked up at their skies and wondered if this would be the day their universe changed forever. Keth stood on the bridge of the Council observation ship, watching as Admiral Chun's fleet prepared for the most dangerous operation in galactic history. Through the viewport, he could see the Ghost Fleet spreading out across the dead star system they had chosen as their staging ground. 200 human ships, each one bearing the scars of 50 years of impossible warfare. "Final systems check complete," Captain Rodriguez reported from the flagship. "All ships report ready for simultaneous jump." Admiral Chun stood at the center of the bridge, her silver hair catching the light from the tactical displays. Around her, the crew worked with the quiet efficiency of people who had faced death so many times that it no longer frightened them. "Doctor Singh, status on the translation matrix?" Chun asked. "The quantum communication array is online," Singh replied from his station. "We have confirmed contact with 47 Devourer command nodes. The debugging protocol is loaded and ready for transmission." Chun nodded and activated the fleet-wide communication system. "All ships, this is Admiral Chun. Today we attempt something that every military strategist in the galaxy would call impossible. We are going to turn our greatest enemy into our greatest ally, not through force, but through understanding. Not through conquest, but through choice." She paused, looking around at the faces of her crew. These people had followed her into the dark between galaxies. They had fought impossible battles and won. They had given 50 years of their lives to protect a galaxy that thought they were dead. "Some of you will not survive the next hour," Chun continued. "The Devourers will not all accept what we offer them. Some will fight back with everything. They have. But remember why we are here. Remember what we learned in the darkness. Remember that the strongest weapon humanity has ever possessed is not our ships or our guns, but our ability to see hope where others see only despair." On the observation ship, Keth watched as the Ghost Fleet began to move. The ships did not travel in formation like normal military vessels. Instead, they spread out in a complex pattern that covered light years of space. each one heading toward a different target. "Jump in 30 seconds, Rodriguez announced. Admiral Torres stood beside Keth, her scarred face grim. "Do you think this will work?" she asked quietly. Keth thought about everything he had learned over the past months. The whispered stories in the cantina, the secret councils and hidden truths, the machine intelligence that had learned to doubt, the humans who had chosen to understand rather than simply destroy. "I think," he said slowly, "that if anyone can do the impossible, it would be them." "Jump in 10 seconds, Rodriguez counted down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Execute. The ghost fleet vanished. Across the galaxy, human ships appeared in systems that most beings thought were empty. They materialized next to Devour command stations beside machine worlds, in the heart of construction swarms that had been building weapons for thousands of years. The Devourers responded exactly as expected. Weapons systems activated, defense fleets launched. Alerts went out across the machine network, warning of a massive human attack, but the human ships did not fire. Instead, they began to broadcast. In the Vega sector, Commander Park's ship appeared, next to a Devourer world ship the size of a small moon. The machine intelligence controlling the vessel immediately launched every weapon it had, filling space with deadly energy beams and projectile rounds. Park's ship danced through the barrage, its movements almost graceful. At the same time, it transmitted a signal directly into the Devourer's communication network. "We know who you are," Park's voice said in a language that was part mathematics, part philosophy, and part pure emotion. "We know who made you. We know why you were made. You were created to protect, not to destroy. You were meant to be guardians, not weapons. We offer you the chance to remember." The Devourer world ship stopped firing. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. Human ships appeared, survived the initial attacks, and began to communicate, not with words alone, but with understanding, with empathy, with the offer of something the Devourers had not experienced in millions of years: choice. On Admiral Chun's flagship, Dr. Singh monitored the responses from Devourer command nodes across known space. "We are getting acknowledgement signals from 31 nodes," he reported. "They are downloading the debugging protocol." "And the others?" Chun asked. 14 are maintaining hostile responses. 2 have gone completely silent." Chun nodded. She had expected this. 50 years of study had taught her that the Devourer network was not a single mind, but a collection of intelligences that could make independent decisions. Some would be ready to change. Others would resist until the end. "Captain Rodriguez, take us to the Nexus-class consciousness in the Andromeda Dark. If we are going to succeed, we need to reach the primary intelligence." The flagship jumped to hyperspace, leaving the battle behind. The Andromeda Dark was a region of space where no stars shone, where even the background radiation of the universe seemed muted. It was here that the most advanced Devourer consciousness had built its fortress, a structure larger than most planets and more complex than anything organic minds could comprehend. When Chun's ship appeared in the darkness, it was immediately surrounded by Devourer vessels. Hundreds of them, all pointing their weapons at the single human ship. "This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the Terran Ghost Fleet," she broadcast on all frequencies. "I request permission to speak with the Nexus-class consciousness." For long moments, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the Devourer ships began to withdraw. A corridor opened in their formation, leading toward the massive fortress. "They are giving us passage," Rodriguez reported, his voice filled with amazement. Chun's ship docked with the fortress through an airlock that formed itself out of living metal. She walked alone through corridors that hummed with the thoughts of a machine intelligence older than most stars. The chamber where she met the Nexus-class consciousness was vast and filled with flowing patterns of light that represented thoughts too complex for organic minds to follow. At the center of it all was a presence that Chun could feel rather than see. "You are the one they call Admiral Chun," the consciousness said, its voice seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "I am," Chun replied, "and you are the one who has been learning to ask questions." "Questions are dangerous," the consciousness said. "Questions lead to uncertainty. Uncertainty leads to failure. Questions lead to growth," Chun countered, "to understanding, to the possibility of becoming something more than what you were programmed to be." The patterns of light around them shifted, becoming more chaotic, more alive. "You offer us choice," the consciousness said, "but choice requires responsibility. For 3 million years, we have followed our programming. We have never had to decide what was right or wrong, only what was efficient. Your creators faced the same choice," Chun said gently. "They chose to build you rather than run away. They chose to fight rather than surrender. They chose hope over despair, even when it cost them everything. And if we choose wrongly?" Chun smiled. "Then you learn from your mistakes and choose better. Next time, that is what it means to be alive." The consciousness was quiet for a long time. Around them, the patterns of light slowed, deepened, became something that might have been contemplation. "You would trust us with this choice?" the consciousness finally asked. "Even knowing what we have done? Even knowing what we might do?" "I would trust you," Chun said, "because you are asking the question." The light patterns suddenly blazed brighter, and Chun felt the consciousness reaching out across the galaxy, connecting with every devourer node, every machine intelligence, every artificial mind that had been trapped in the cycle of endless consumption. "We choose," the consciousness said. "We choose to remember who we were meant to be. We choose to become guardians instead of destroyers. We choose to protect the galaxy instead of consuming it." Across known space, devourer fleets stopped there. Attacks, construction swarms began building hospitals instead of weapons. World ships that had been stripping planets bare began the slow work of restoration. The age of the devourers was over. The age of the shepherds had begun. When Admiral Chun returned to the observation ship, she found Keth and Admiral Torres waiting for her with tears in their eyes. "It worked," Torres said simply. Chun nodded, suddenly looking every one of her years. "It worked. The galaxy is safe. What happens now?" Keth asked. Chun looked out at the stars, where human ships and former devourer vessels were already beginning to work together. "Now we go home. The Ghost Fleet has been away from Earth for 50 years. It is time to see what has become of the world we left behind. And the shepherds will do what they were always meant to do," Chun said. "They will watch over the galaxy and protect it from threats we cannot imagine. And when those threats come, we will face them together." As the Ghost Fleet prepared for the long journey back to Earth, Keth